My wife chose to defend her daughter while she tried to destroy everything I built, so I walked away. And what happened next left them shattered. I am a 32-year-old guy, married for a year to a woman named Andy, who I thought was just incredible. She's 34, and I'm not kidding. Up until all this started happening, I genuinely thought I'd lucked out. We met, hit it off pretty well, and took things nice and slow, mostly because of her daughter, Carrie. Carrie is 16 now, but when I met her, she was about 14, and man, I could tell right away she wasn't thrilled about me being there. Which, okay, fair enough. Her dad passed in a car accident 5 years ago, and Andy had been pretty much a single mom since then. So, yeah, I knew going in this was going to be a tough sell with her kid. I told Andy from the start I didn't want to overstep or try to act like Carrie's dad or anything. I figured I didn't want to replace anyone here. I just wanted things to go as smoothly as possible. Andy and I decided not to even mention me to Carrie until we knew this relationship was solid. No point in stressing her out unless there was something serious going on between us. It took a while, but eventually we hit that point, and then came the big day. I met Carrie. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous, but I was going in with an open mind, hoping she'd at least be okay with me just hanging around, you know. Well, that meeting was awkward as hell. Carrie just stared at me like I'd shown up to steal the TV or something. She barely said a word to me, avoided eye contact. The whole 9 yards, she wasn't even subtle about it. She'd make these faces every time I spoke, rolling her eyes, acting like she couldn't be bothered. Look, I get it. She probably felt like her mom was moving on too fast or that I was some guy trying to take over, and I had zero plans to try and replace her dad. The last thing I wanted was to make her feel like I was forcing a relationship on her. I made sure she knew that too. I told her she could just call me by my first name. She didn't need to call me stepdad or anything weird like that. Andy told me to give it some time, and I figured, yeah, okay, maybe she'd come around if I didn't push it. So I tried. I'd do little things like invite her to come out with us or ask her if she wanted to go grab some food or something casual. I never forced anything. If she wasn't feeling it, I'd just back off. But man, every time I tried to engage, it felt like she'd throw a little dig my way, say something under her breath, or just flat out ignore me. I'd say something like, "Hey, Carrie, you want to go to this new burger place with us?" And she'd just look right through me and say, "No thanks," in that tone, you know, like I was wasting her time even asking. One time I suggested that maybe we could go see a movie she wanted, and she actually laughed. She was like, "Oh, I don't think you'd get it," with this sneer. I mean, all right, it's a teenage thing, maybe. But it felt like she wasn't even trying. Andy would always tell me, "She'll warm up, just give her time." But sometimes I'd think, how much time do I have to give? Things stayed awkward. I'd see glimpses where I thought maybe Carrie was thawing a bit, like she'd actually answer a question now and then without the usual eye roll or sigh. But every time I thought we were getting somewhere, it was back to square one. Like this one weekend when we all went to Andy's parents' place for a family thing, I thought, okay, neutral territory, maybe things will go smoother. Nope. Carrie avoided me the entire time and made this huge deal about sitting as far from me as possible at every meal. At one point, she actually got up and switched chairs because she thought I was sitting too close. I'd bring it up with Andy, try to talk about it, you know, just to see if maybe there was something I was missing or something I could do differently. And Andy was always like, "Just let her be. She's been through a lot, losing her dad and all. She'll come around." I understood where she was coming from, but it felt like I was supposed to just stand there and take it without saying anything. And maybe I should have, I don't know. I kept telling myself it would get better, but it didn't. After a while, I was starting to feel like a guest in my own relationship, like if Carrie didn't want me there, I didn't belong. I kept wondering if I'd ever even have a decent conversation with her without her snapping back or blowing me off. Andy would always try to play peacemaker, but honestly, I felt like she was stuck in the middle, and I didn't want her feeling like she had to choose between us. Now I know how this sounds. Some might say, hey, it's just teenage stuff. But this wasn't normal. It felt personal. I'd come home, try to have a normal day, and bam, Carrie's doing something passive-aggressive or throwing shade at me. The tension was thick, like I was walking on eggshells in my own house, and every little attempt to make things better felt like it was backfiring. I mean, how do you even deal with that? I didn't want to fight with a 16-year-old. I just wanted things to be okay. Looking back, maybe I could have tried something different, but what? I wasn't going to kiss up or beg her to like me. I wasn't the enemy here, just a guy trying to be a good partner to her mom. And even though I knew her dad's death was a huge loss, it wasn't an excuse for her to keep treating me like dirt. I tried to be the bigger person, to just let her comments and attitudes slide, thinking maybe she'd grow out of it. But honestly, I was starting to get fed up. How much was I supposed to take? Andy kept saying she'd get better, but I was stuck waiting, hoping this invisible better time would come. And every time Carrie ignored me, every time she threw one of her attitude bombs, it felt like another slap in the face, like I wasn't good enough to be part of their lives. Anyway, I'd convinced myself that once we all moved in together, things would change, that maybe she'd feel more at home, and maybe start seeing me as more than just Mom's annoying new husband. I'd never lived with a teenager before, so I thought it was just going to be an adjustment period. I thought I'd get to know her better, maybe even grow close, as wild as that seems now. But if I'd known what was coming, maybe I would have thought twice about getting that serious with Andy at all. Moving in was just the beginning of a whole new level of chaos, and as much as I wanted to believe Carrie would come around, the truth was, I was diving headfirst into something I had no control over, and man, was I in for a rude awakening. So, we finally decided to take the plunge and all move in together. I was honestly hopeful that maybe Carrie just needed more time around me, like maybe she'd just been feeling like a stranger in her mom's relationship this whole time, and that living together would help break down those walls. I was hoping for one of those moments where we'd all have some big family bonding experience, and Carrie would finally see I wasn't the enemy. But man, was I wrong. The second they moved into my place, it was like Carrie flipped a switch and took her attitude from distant and cold to full-blown hostility. I'm talking about trashing my stuff, giving me the silent treatment, and straight up treating me like I was some invader in my own damn house. She'd ignore me so hard that I'd actually have to double-check if I was even in the same room. It was like she saw me as some kind of threat that needed to be fought off at every turn. At first it was small stuff, like leaving her dishes piled up in the sink, which I thought was a normal teenager thing. I'd just clean them up and move on because, picking battles and all that. But things escalated fast. I started noticing little acts of rebellion. Tiny messes left around just to piss me off, towels thrown on the bathroom floor, garbage not taken out, random stuff like that. I'd mention it to Andy, hoping she'd see what was going on, but she'd just brush it off with, "Oh, it's just a phase. She'll grow out of it." Then one day, I come home from work and head into the kitchen, and there's glass all over the damn floor. I mean, shards of glass everywhere, like a whole set of plates and cups had been smashed. I thought maybe she had dropped something by accident, so I started cleaning it up. But then I noticed some of the pieces looked like they were intentionally broken. I'm talking about clean breaks, the kind you get from someone chucking stuff as hard as they can. I asked Andy about it, and she looked stressed but tried to play it off, saying, "Oh, she's just frustrated. I'll talk to her." And I'm like, frustrated? So what, she just goes full destruction mode now? But I bit my tongue and just let her deal with it, hoping maybe a talk from her mom would actually help. Well, it didn't. If anything, Carrie just doubled down. She started going for the petty stuff, and it was like she was finding creative ways to make my life hell. She'd leave half-empty cans of soda tipped over on the coffee table so the drink would spill all over, and then she'd leave it like that for me to find. Or she'd dump a whole bag of chips on the couch and just leave the crumbs smashed into the fabric, staring right at me like, "What are you going to do about it?" I tried to tell Andy, "Look, this isn't normal. She's going out of her way to be disrespectful." But Andy would always just sigh and tell me, "She's going through a tough time. Just be patient." Being patient was getting harder by the day, and yeah, I'll admit it, I have a bit of a temper, but I was really holding back for Andy's sake. I didn't want to be the angry stepdad or whatever, so I'd take deep breaths and try to ignore it, even though every time I came home, I had no idea what new mess Carrie had cooked up. And then came the big one. I'll never forget this because it's the day I finally lost it. I had just come home from a long day, and as soon as I stepped inside, there was this god-awful smell, like something had died in there. I'm sniffing around, trying to find the source, and I finally realize it's coming from the fridge. I open it up, and there's raw chicken sitting out on the top shelf, just out in the open, not even wrapped. It had been left there for who knows how long because the stench was overwhelming. Turns out Carrie had taken the chicken out for meal prep, her words, not mine, and just left it there, like she couldn't be bothered to clean up. I called her down, trying to keep my voice steady, and asked her, "What the hell is going on?" She just shrugged and said, "I forgot." That's all she had to say. No apology, nothing. I ended up cleaning it myself, grumbling to myself the whole time, trying not to explode. But then, just a few days later, she topped even that. I walk into the garage to get something, and I find a bunch of my tools just lying around, covered in mud. Carrie had been messing around in there and decided to treat my stuff like it was some kind of playground. I asked her, "Why are my tools covered in mud?" And she just looked at me, deadpan, and said, "I needed them, so what?" I finally snapped. I yelled, probably louder than I should have, telling her this was my house and she needed to respect my things. Andy heard the whole thing and came rushing in, trying to mediate, telling me, "Please, don't make it worse." But at that point, I was done. I told Andy straight up, "This can't keep going. I'm sick of Carrie's crap." Andy looked hurt, but I didn't care at that moment. I'd been trying to be the nice guy, trying to be patient, but Carrie was treating me like I was trash, and I wasn't about to keep dealing with it. Andy promised me again that she'd talk to Carrie, and I just laughed and said, sure, maybe this time it'll actually work. But the next day, Carrie pulled her most ridiculous stunt yet. I woke up to find that she'd gone into my office and unplugged all my computer cables, just because. It took me half an hour to get everything back in place, and that was when I realized I was dealing with a kid who genuinely didn't give a damn about anyone but herself. This was no teenage phase. This was a full-on meltdown from a kid who thought she could get away with anything. At this point, every little thing she did felt like a personal attack. I couldn't walk into a single room without wondering what new chaos Carrie had left for me to find. And every time I'd bring it up to Andy, she'd just say, she'll come around, just give her space. Well, I'd given all the space I had. I was losing my mind trying to keep it together while Carrie was wrecking my stuff and laughing it off. It was only a matter of time before I reached my breaking point. Looking back, maybe I could have done something different, but honestly, I was fed up with always having to be the one keeping the peace. I was tired of feeling like I was just waiting for Carrie to decide I was worth a sliver of respect, and deep down, I was starting to question if moving in together was the biggest mistake I'd ever made. So, this is where it all went down, the point where I finally had enough. I had been putting up with Carrie's mess and attitude for what felt like forever, hoping things would eventually get better. But turns out, I was just a sucker for thinking anything was going to change because the way she crossed the line this time, there was no going back. It started off like any other night. Andy and I decided to go out for dinner, just the two of us. We hadn't had a real date night in a while, and honestly, I needed a break from the constant tension in the house. Andy was always saying I needed to see the good in Carrie, but I hadn't seen anything remotely good from that kid in months. So yeah, I was looking forward to a few hours of peace. We get back from dinner, pull into the driveway, and as soon as I get out of the car, I see the garage doors wide open. Now I know I closed it when we left because I'm pretty paranoid about that kind of thing. And even if I hadn't, it was late at night by this point. Carrie should have been inside, not in the garage. So I'm already on edge, thinking something's off. I step into the garage, and I freeze. Right there in the middle of the garage is my car, my pride and joy, a BMW X5, and it's trashed. I'm talking slashed tires, deep scratches down the sides, and what looks like a broken side mirror. There are even scuff marks on the hood, like someone had been stomping on it. And who's standing there with a kitchen knife in her hand, looking as calm as can be? Carrie. I felt my blood go cold. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. She just stood there, looking at me with this smug little smirk on her face, like she was proud of herself. I managed to choke out, "What the hell, Carrie? What are you doing?" And she just shrugged, all casual, like this wasn't some felony-level vandalism she'd just committed. "It's just a car," she says. "Just a car." I lost it. I'd been holding back for months, letting all her little stunts slide, trying to keep the peace for Andy's sake. But this was beyond anything I could have imagined. I straight up called her a spoiled little brat and told her to get the hell out of my sight. I know I shouldn't have yelled, but what else was I supposed to do? She just destroyed my car for fun. At this point, Andy comes running into the garage, probably because she heard the yelling. She takes one look at the car, and instead of laying into Carrie, she turns to me, all calm, and says, "It's not as bad as it looks. She's just acting out. Don't make it worse by yelling." I couldn't believe it. I'm standing there staring at my car, thousands of dollars in damage right in front of us, and she's telling me not to make it worse. I looked at Andy, speechless. I mean, how could she possibly defend this? I told her, this isn't acting out, this is criminal behavior, she needs to face consequences. But Andy didn't want to hear it. She tried to pull Carrie away, saying they'd talk about it in the morning, and that we should all cool off. I wasn't cooling off, not after what Carrie had done. So, I told Andy right then and there, if you think this is okay, if you're fine with Carrie destroying my property and treating me like crap, then both of you can leave. Andy's jaw dropped. She wasn't expecting me to say that. She kept saying, "You don't mean that, you're just angry." But I wasn't just angry. I was done with being disrespected in my own home, done with the constant messes, and done with Carrie's attitude. I was tired of playing the bad guy while Carrie got a free pass on everything. I told Andy, if she doesn't pay for the damage, I'll sue her. Yeah, it sounds extreme, but I'd hit my breaking point. I've got cameras in the garage, everything was on tape. There was no way she was getting away with this. Andy's face went pale, and she started tearing up, saying I was being heartless and taking things too far. She tried to guilt-trip me, saying that Carrie was going through a lot and that she'd been struggling since her dad died. I get it. Losing a parent is brutal, but it doesn't give you a free pass to wreck someone's property and show zero remorse about it. I told her, I'm sorry for what Carrie's going through, but this is too much. This kind of behavior isn't normal, and I'm not going to pretend it is just to keep the peace. We went back and forth for about 15 minutes, me telling Andy that if Carrie didn't pay for the damage, I'd take her to court, and Andy saying I was cruel for even suggesting it. It was like she was so blinded by her loyalty to Carrie that she couldn't see the damage Carrie was causing, not just to my car, but to our entire relationship. And honestly, at that moment, I realized Andy was never going to see it. I had been fooling myself this whole time, thinking she'd come around and actually stand up for me. But here she was, defending Carrie, even when the kid had slashed my tires and trashed my car. I looked at Carrie one last time and she was just standing there, not a single ounce of guilt on her face. That smug little smirk was still there, like she'd won some game I didn't even know we were playing. That's when I told them both, "Get out, pack your bags, and go." They looked shocked, like they couldn't believe I'd actually followed through. Andy started begging me to calm down, saying we could work it out, that Carrie didn't mean it. But I was beyond caring at that point. I was done trying to fix things when it was obvious no one else was interested in making this work. As they left, I stood there, looking at the wreck that was once my car, feeling more drained than I've ever felt in my life. I'd spent a year trying to make this family work, putting up with so much crap because I loved Andy and wanted a life with her. But when it came down to it, Carrie's actions showed me exactly where I stood, and Andy's reaction proved it. That night, I sat in the quiet, wondering how the hell it had all come to this. I felt stupid for letting it go on this long, for hoping things would change when they never would. But one thing was clear. I wasn't letting Carrie or anyone else walk all over me anymore. This was the last straw, and I'd finally had enough. After they left, I sat there in the silence, feeling a weird mix of anger and relief. I kept looking out the window, half expecting Andy to come back or for Carrie to storm in with another tantrum. But no one came back. For the first time in what felt like ages, the house was completely quiet. It hit me then that it was really over. This whole year had been this constant push and pull, with me trying to make things work, bending over backward to make everyone happy. But now that they were gone, I finally felt what it was like to have peace, and honestly, it was amazing. I went back into the garage to look at my car, the slashed tires, the scratches, the damage Carrie had done. It was all still there. Seeing it pissed me off, but at the same time, it was like a reminder of why things had to end. I didn't feel guilty for telling them to leave. After everything Carrie put me through and Andy just letting it slide, I knew this was the right decision. There was no going back. That night, I slept better than I had in months. I didn't have to worry about stepping on broken glass in the kitchen or finding my tools scattered all over the garage. I didn't have to walk into a room and wonder what kind of mess Carrie had left for me. For once, I actually felt at home in my own place. The next morning, I started making plans to move on. I knew I'd have to deal with the car situation, figure out if I was going to repair it or replace it, and maybe even file a police report if it came to that. But for now, I just wanted to enjoy the quiet, to actually feel like I was in control of my own life again. As the days went by, I started getting texts from Andy. At first, she was just checking in, asking if we could talk. She'd send these long messages telling me how much she missed me, how she thought we could work things out, how Carrie was just acting out because of her dad's death, same stuff she'd been saying all along. And honestly, it just reminded me why I couldn't keep doing this. I'd given it everything I had, tried to make it work, and Carrie kept pushing every single button I had while Andy defended her. I ignored most of the texts. I knew if I replied, it would just lead to another back and forth where she'd try to talk me into taking them back. But I wasn't interested. I'd made my decision, and I was sticking to it. A few days later, Andy showed up at the house. I hadn't answered her messages, so I guess she decided to try face-to-face. I opened the door, and there she was, looking all teary-eyed and apologetic. She told me how hard things had been for her and Carrie, how Carrie was still struggling with losing her dad, and how she thought I was giving up on them too easily. I just listened, but the more she talked, the more I realized nothing had changed. She was still making excuses, still defending Carrie, still refusing to see my side. Finally, I stopped her and told her, "I've put up with this for a year. I've given everything I could to make this family work, and all I got was disrespect and chaos. I'm done." She looked hurt, but I could tell she didn't really understand. She started saying things like, "Carrie will change, and we can work through this," but I wasn't buying it. I told her, "You had a year to make her understand that she couldn't just treat people like crap and get away with it, and you did nothing. I can't live like that anymore." After a long, awkward silence, she finally nodded and said she understood. I think for the first time she realized that I wasn't going to back down, that I wasn't going to let Carrie walk all over me anymore. She tried to say a few more things, but I just told her goodbye and closed the door. I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me into changing my mind. Once she was gone, I felt this huge weight lift off my shoulders. I'd been holding on to this idea of us being this happy little family, but that was just some fantasy I'd built up in my head. The reality was that I'd been living in a nightmare, and it was finally over. In the days that followed, I started putting my life back together. I focused on fixing up the house, getting things organized, making it feel like my place again. It felt like I was reclaiming my space, and with every little thing I did, I felt more like myself. People started asking questions, of course. Friends and family wanted to know what happened, why Andy and Carrie were gone. I kept it simple, just told them it didn't work out. No one really pushed for details, and that was fine by me. I wasn't interested in rehashing every little thing Carrie had done, or explaining why Andy hadn't backed me up. The people who knew me well could tell I was happier, and that was enough. There were moments, though, when I'd think back on it all and feel a bit of sadness, maybe a little regret. Not because I missed them, but because I'd put so much time and energy into something that turned out to be a complete mess. I'd wanted a family, wanted to be that supportive partner for Andy, and it hadn't worked out. But in the end, I realized it was better to be alone and happy than stuck in a toxic situation where I was constantly disrespected. One day, I was cleaning out the garage and finally decided to get rid of some of the things that reminded me of Carrie and Andy. I tossed out some random junk they'd left behind, old clothes, notebooks, whatever. And as I was doing it, I felt like I was really moving forward, like I was closing that chapter of my life for good. So, after everything went down, Andy reached out, wanting to talk. I'll be honest, I wasn't thrilled to meet up, but I thought maybe there'd be some sort of closure, or maybe she'd finally see my side. We sat down, and she started talking about how we could work through it and how I needed to just be patient. She wanted me to come back and try again, promising that Carrie would get better, that this was all just a rough phase. But I was done. I mean, I'd already been patient. I'd been giving chances for a year, while Carrie wrecked my stuff and my peace of mind, and Andy let it happen every single time. I told her, as calmly as I could, "I'm sorry, but I'm done, Andy. I can't keep doing this." I explained that I needed to think about myself for once, that this wasn't just about one incident, but a whole pattern of disrespect and chaos. And honestly, I could tell she didn't fully get it. I think she really believed this could be fixed if I just put up with Carrie's nonsense a little longer. But the thing is, I didn't want to put up with it. I was tired of waiting for a kid who had zero respect for me, tired of Andy constantly defending her, and tired of feeling like an outsider in my own home. So, we ended up signing the divorce papers pretty quickly. Thanks to our prenup and the fact that we didn't share finances, it wasn't a messy process. It was actually pretty simple. We just sat down with the papers, signed them, and that was that. No need to drag it out any more than we already had. In some ways it felt surreal, like, is this really it? But I knew deep down that this was the right thing to do. The relief I felt was all the proof I needed. Of course, there was still the matter of the car damage. That was where things got tricky. My insurance company wouldn't cover it because apparently vandalism wasn't included in my policy, so all $6,000 worth of damage was on me. Seeing that estimate was like a punch to the gut, especially after everything else that had happened. I told Andy straight up that Carrie needed to take responsibility for what she'd done and cover the costs. But, surprise, surprise, Andy didn't have the money, and she wasn't exactly in a position to help. She'd moved back in with her parents, and was struggling to find her own place, so her hands were tied. I debated for a while whether I should just let it go, but honestly, why should I? Carrie had to learn that actions have consequences, and I was tired of being the one constantly left to pick up the pieces. So, I made a deal with Andy. I'd cover the cost of the repairs up front, and she'd pay me back monthly until it was all settled. We even got it written up officially, just so there'd be no forgetting or backing out. I wasn't going to leave it to chance. And because I'd filed a police report, Carrie now has a criminal record. I know some people might think that's extreme, but if you'd been in my shoes, you'd understand. She brought this on herself. Maybe now she'd realize she couldn't just go around trashing people's property and expect no consequences. The weeks that followed were interesting. I'll admit, it was strange at first, coming home to an empty house without all the messes and attitude waiting for me. I'd grown so used to the tension that it took a little while to get used to the quiet. But the weird thing? After the first few days, I started to feel a lot lighter. It was like this massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I didn't have to worry about stepping on broken glass in the kitchen or finding my tools scattered all over the garage. For the first time in months, I actually felt at peace. Friends have been great through all of this. I told a few of them what happened, and they were all on my side. They kept telling me I'd done the right thing, that I needed to stand up for myself. It felt good to hear that because honestly, there were moments where I wondered if I'd made the right call. I mean, it's not every day you kick your wife and stepdaughter out. But then I'd remind myself of everything I'd put up with, and any doubts I had would disappear. I'd spent a year being patient, being understanding, bending over backward to keep the peace, and where did it get me? A slashed-up car, and a stepdaughter who treated me like dirt. No, I didn't regret my decision one bit. And thanks to all of you here who told me I wasn't the a-hole. I know this might sound cheesy, but your comments actually helped a lot. It's weird to think about, but sometimes it's easier to get perspective from people who don't even know you than from those who do. Reading your comments, seeing the support, the "you're not the bad guy here" messages, it was exactly what I needed to keep moving forward. Every now and then I'd get a text from Andy. Nothing too major, just little messages checking in, seeing how I was doing. I ignored most of them. I wasn't interested in rehashing anything or being guilt-tripped into second-guessing myself. She'd made her choice when she sided with Carrie time after time, and I'd made mine. Besides, the last thing I needed was to get pulled back into that mess. Now, with everything behind me, I'm focusing on getting my life back on track. I started doing little projects around the house, fixing things up, organizing, making it feel like mine again. It's amazing how different everything feels without all that stress hanging over me. I'm reconnecting with friends I hadn't seen in months, making time for hobbies I'd let go of, just taking care of myself for once. And yeah, it feels pretty damn good. So yeah, it's been a hell of a few weeks, but in the end I feel lighter. I feel free. I've got my peace, my space, and my sanity back, and that's worth more than anything I could have gained by staying. Here's to moving on, and thanks to all of you who reminded me I wasn't the a-hole in this mess.